Oh my goodness, it's 9 o'clock. So, good day and welcome everyone. I'm Ben Faber with Cooperative Extension in Ventura, Santa Barbara counties. Welcome to the Avocado Society, Avocado Commission, and University of California Cooperative Extension Avocado Seminar Series. This is the first time on the web. This time we'll be focusing on avocado varieties and avocado rootstocks. And these are being presented by some of the folks who have done most of the work in California on these two topics. And we'd like to thank our supporters, American Ag Credit, Calavo, Mission Produce, Index Fresh, Del Rey Avocado, Westphalia, AGQ Labs, Brocon Nursery, Subtropics Nurseries, Agri-Service, and Wilbur's Ellis. So with that, our speakers today are Mary Lou Arpaia, Eric Focht, and Rodrigo Iturrieta, all three of which are with the Botany Plant Soil Sciences Department at UC Riverside, and Patricia Manosalva with the Microbiology and Plant Pathology Department at UC Riverside. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mary Lou.
So good morning, everybody. And I'm very happy to be here to talk to you about the work that we've been doing on new varieties. So I'm going to, the presentation for the next hour, we're going to divide the hour into 3 sections. And I'm going to talk first. I'm going to give you more of the past and the present. And then I'm going to turn it over to Eric and Rodrigo, and they're going to talk to you about the future. So with that, I'm very happy that you're here. We have the 3 of us form the team for developing new varieties at UC Riverside. And we're going to tell you a little bit about what we do today. So the industry in California has been, for the last 100 years, has been really dominated by 2 varieties, and that is the Forte and the Hass variety. So you could see the Forte dominated the industry from approximately 1920 to the 1970s. And unlike the Hass, the Forte is a green skin variety. The Hass, although it was patented back in 1935, did not come into prominence until the 1970s. So I just want to give 1 or 2 slides about the Forte. It was brought in from Jalisco, Mexico, which is in 1911. It was brought in by the Popeno family, and it quickly was recognized for its high quality. And by 1920, it was the leading variety in California, and as I said earlier, remained so until the 1970s. So it was adapted to a wide variety of climates in California, especially is very cold hardy. It was known for its fruit quality in the winter and spring period, but it was also recognized that it made a very large tree, and as time went by, it was recognized for having severe alternate bearing. And so people were interested in new varieties. So the rise of Hass, it took a long time for Hass to become the dominant variety. It was a chance seedling found in La Habra in the mid-1920s, patented in 1935. It was recognized for its very high quality. It was recognized to be less alternate. We complain about alternate bearing of Hass today, but it was recognized to be less alternate bearing than Forte. And but you can see here in an article in 1945 in the California Avocado Society yearbook, they talk about all the wonderful things about the Hass variety, but they talk about also that it's an interesting variety, but we're really not interested in it because it's a black skin fruit, and the US consumer does not want a black skin fruit. They only want a green skin fruit. So keep that in mind, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. So we have many other varieties. There's been hundreds of varieties identified and registered through the California Avocado Society through the years. We still grow many of those: Pinkerton, Reed, Zutano, Bacon, Charwell, etc. But Hass is the dominant variety grown here in California. I want to talk briefly about the contributions of Bob Berg. Bob Berg came to the University of California, Riverside in the 1950s. He was a variety breeder for many, many years, retiring in the early 1990s. He, when he first started, now remember, he started in the 1950s when Forte was the #1 variety. He went and polled the industry at the time and said, what kind of varieties do we want to see for California? And they came back and they told them, we want basically a green skin Hass variety, because #1 is later than Forte, so we can extend our season. And #2, we recognize that the Hass is a very high quality fruit. So he set about doing that in the 1950s, and in 1983, 84, he released his answer to that challenge, which was the Gwen variety. In 1986, he planted a second wave of approximately 60,000 seeds, and from that we have many new varieties: Lamb Hass, Surprise, Harvest, and Gem. So the Gwen variety, Gwen is not commercially grown except at a very, very, very small scale today. But when I was hired in the early 1980s, there was a lot of excitement about the Gwen varieties. In fact, there was a Gwen Growers Association for a while. It was specifically bred, as I said, to be a green skin Hass, and it is very, very similar to Hass in many respects. The main thing is, though, that it is a smaller tree. It has less alternate bearing, but it has the same season of Hass. And you can see here, the fruit is a little bit more round than Hass. Unfortunately, by the time that the Gwen was released, we were a Hass-centric industry. And so there was not much interest in the Gwen when it was released. And so we can go back to the statement in 1945 by Griswold that the single disadvantage of Hass when it was first released was its black skin. In 1988, Bob Berg and Gray Martin wrote in the Avocado Society yearbook, a drawback of the Gwen was the fact that it's a green skin. So things change. But it also tells us, as running a breeding program, that we have to be very flexible and open-minded with what we select, and that consumer trends, industry trends will change over time. So the progeny of Gwen. In 1996, the Lamb Hass variety was released. This is a seedling of the Gwen variety. And in 2003, 2 additional varieties were released that are progeny of Gwen. One is the Gem variety, and one is Harvest. The Harvest variety is not, it has a lot of problems. It tends to alternate bear. It's a very open, rangy tree, and it has not become established anywhere in the world that I know of in terms as a commercially important variety. But the Gem has. So the Gem was selected in 1990 by Gray Martin. It was a seedling grown on the Lamb Ranch. It's in the same cohort as Lamb Hass. And when it was released in 2003, there was virtually no interest in California about the Gem. And in 2006, Westphalia in South Africa, because Gray Martin had provided material to Westphalia to do testing in South Africa. They came to the University of California and they said, we're interested. We see a future in Gem. And so they entered into an agreement with the University of California to further test Gem and later to commercialize the Gem as a variety. And it's ironic, I think, that it wasn't until Gem became an important variety through the efforts of Westphalia that people began to gain interest in the variety as a commercial alternative to Hass here in California. So that's of interest to me, at least. So this is a lamb Hass. You can see the fruit tends to be larger than the Hass. It is very diagnostic because it has this very square shoulder here, and it's also more square on the bottom. There are key differences between the lamb and Hass. It is a late season fruit. Its seasonality is much later than Hass. It's a mid to late summer fruit hanging into the very early fall. It has a very upright growth habit. It has very flexible wood. And because of that, the wood is borne inside the tree. We know that the lamb Hass is more tolerant to Persea mite and other pests. And it also appears to be more heat tolerant and slightly more cold tolerant than Hass. And so here's just a comparison of the growth habit. On the right is lamb Hass, and on the left is Hass. These trees were, I took this picture in San Diego County, and the trees were about 5 years old at the time. They were both on Duke 7 rootstock. Now moving on to gem, I know a lot of you on this meeting are trying to grow gem. The gem fruit, again, tends to be slightly heavier than Hass. It's a more round or ovate fruit. It turns black as well. And this picture doesn't show it, but it has a light yellow speckling on the peel that is very nice when the fruit ripens. So the key differences between Hass and gem, it has a slightly later season than Hass, but the seasons overlap. It can accumulate very high levels of dry matter. Late in the season, it is not uncommon to see 30 or even 40% dry matter for the variety. The growth habit of the gem is very, very similar to its mother, the Gwen. It is a more vase-like compact tree and can be planted on high density. It also, like the lamb Hass, has a very flexible wood, although it's not quite as flexible as the lamb Hass. We're not sure about the pest tolerance for Persea mite. It's probably somewhere in between Hass and gem. And it distinctly has less alternate bearing than Hass. So here is a tree of gem and the fruit hanging on the tree. You can see the yellow speckling on the peel of the fruit that makes it a very attractive fruit. The picture of this fruit, the tree was, this is in Irvine at the South Coast Research and Extension Center, and the tree is about 8 years old at this point in time. So I want to show you some data. When I first took over the breeding program, we set out rootstock top working trials throughout the state. I'm going to show you data from Irvine, but we collected data as far north as San Luis Obispo and data as far south in San Diego. So, but we had the most complete data set from the data at the South Coast Research and Extension Center. So this is comparing Hass, lamb Hass, and gem, a top working trial in the same field. And this is the yield data from 99 to 2005. And you can see that both the lamb Hass and the gem produced more fruit than the Hass over that time period. This is alternate bearing index. So I took, you can see that the lamb Hass and the Hass, some years have very little fruit, like this little tiny yellow bar here. And you can see the lamb Hass has virtually no fruit in the final year in 2005. And so you can calculate the alternate bearing index. The higher the number, the more alternate bearing. And so I'm never going to tell you that the gem does not alternate bear, but you can see that the variability from year to year is less than the lamb Hass and Hass. If we look at average fruit size, the lamb Hass tends to have the largest fruit size, gem is intermediate, and the Hass was the small. And this is the average fruit size over all those years that we collected yield data. So we had other varieties in the trial, but in all the trial, the cumulative yield of gem and lamb Hass were typically higher than Hass. alternate bearing was for gem was the lowest, least alternate bearing at all the sites. We noticed that in very hot areas, the gem can become very elongated, almost torpedo shape. Although I have seen fruit now from the San Joaquin Valley, and that's not always the case. And we had a freeze in 2007 at the end of this trial, and it appears that the gem was the only one of all the varieties that actually came back with a good bloom that year. So we don't know, but it looks like, along with the lamb, that they are a little bit more cold hardy and a little bit more heat hardy than Hass. I wanted to mention about tree size. So this is data from a different trial at the Jim Lloyd Butler Ranch in Ventura County. The trees were planted in 2012, and we've collected canopy volume. This is the entire space that the tree occupies, and you can see that the lamb Hass in yellow and the gem in orange are significantly smaller than Hass. And that they've been smaller than Hass, but this difference is really obvious now that the trees are 7 years old. This also translates into a yield efficiency, but I don't have that data to show you because we haven't collected the 2020 yield data. And in fact, in 2 weeks, we will be collecting that data, and I will update the information we have. I wanted to say a little bit about minimum maturity for both the lamb Hass and the gem. Minimum maturity is 22.8%. This was based on data that we collected in those top working trials, as well as doing consumer. We did a very large trial with the lamb Hass from 2000 to 2003. And using consumer panels to look at what the minimum maturity was for the fruit when the fruit was minimally acceptable. And that ended up being 22.8. We did less work with the gem in the same time period, and it appeared that the minimum maturity of gem was approximately the same as lamb Hass. Now, I should mention that in the early 1980s, Sukun Lee, when the industry converted from oil to dry matter, concluded that the dry matter and minimum maturity of Hass should actually be 22.8 as well. And for different reasons that we don't have time to go into today, the minimum maturity for Hass is lower. But the original work, when we converted to dry matter for Hass, was the same as these. We have a release date project going on right now for gem, and this is just data that we've collected for the 2019-2020 season. And you can see in the blue and the red line, this is Southern California, and which is Ventura and San Diego County and Orange County. And the blue line is the north, which is Santa Barbara and Ventura counties. The green line is data that we collected this year from 3 grower sites in the San Joaquin Valley. And you can see that the maturity is greatly enhanced in the San Joaquin Valley. And so we need to follow up on that as we move towards recommending release dates for this variety. We have 1 more year of data to collect, and then the project will be completed. I just want to say a few words about Maluma Hass. Maluma is a variety from South Africa. It was recently released from quarantine in 2019, and Brocon Nursery is growing this variety, and we're looking forward to having trees available to look at here in California in the very near future. You can see that the growth habit of the tree is upright. In fact, the first time I saw Maluma in South Africa, I thought I was looking at lamb Hass. If you're familiar with lamb Hass, Maluma Hass is very, very similar. So it originated in South Africa. It's actually patented here in the United States. And the minimum dry matter for the variety in South Africa is 20%. In South Africa, they're growing it under high density, and they're even doing work with trellising the variety. And Rodrigo, I believe, will talk a little bit about that indirectly. But they are doing work because the tree has very flexible wood and is very adaptable to trellising, which also tell us that some of our varieties, like the gem perhaps, and some of the new varieties that we're about to release could also be trellised and planted in high density. They're growing it. The variety is being grown throughout the world. It's being grown in South America, in Spain, and in Israel that I know of, Australia and New Zealand. So, but it's early days here in California. I think it should do very well. I actually think it should do well in San Joaquin Valley, but we don't know. So, is there life beyond CAS or Maluma or gem or anything else that we release in the future? Another way of looking at that, should we just be content with what we have? And I would put forward to you that no, we should not. Because at least our leading variety can be improved. We complain about alternate bearing. We complain about small fruit size. We complain about it being susceptible to Persea mite. These are all things that we can work on and improve through genetics. And Rodrigo will touch upon a little bit of this later. It is also very, very dangerous to be an industry based on one variety. And there's many examples out there for bananas, for instance, with Fusarium, that is very, very dangerous to be dependent upon one variety. So from my perspective, I think as growers, we need to have higher production efficiency. We need to go to high density. We need to get rid of the ladders. We need to find varieties that are stress tolerant. We can do some of that through rootstocks, but we can also do a lot of that in terms of salt tolerance through varieties. So finding new varieties, how difficult is it? It's pretty difficult. It takes 15 to 25 years from the time you plant a seed to the time that you could commercialize a variety. It's, Bob Berg told me it's like looking for a needle in a haystack, and it's really true. Typically, only 3 or 4 seedling trees that you plant per 1,000 trees will even make it to a second level evaluation. Trying to find something that has high fruit quality and has the horticultural traits that we need as growers is very, very difficult. And then defining what traits you really want to look for, things change. Just remember, CAS with black skin was undesirable when it was first released. Gwen, when it was released, by that time, we didn't want a green skinned fruit. We wanted a black skinned fruit. So being able to do crystal ball gazing is very, very difficult. From a practical perspective, it's very difficult. We have long seasonality. We don't know when a seedling tree produces fruit for the first time. When should we pick this tree? We don't know. It takes a long time to figure out the seasonality of a particular seedling. So our program goal is to expand the environmental adaptability of avocados in California. We want to enhance yield potential. We want to minimize, we want to help you get rid of the ladder. We want to help you get away from spraying the trees for insect pests. But we also know that ultimately we need to deliver consistent high quality fruit to the consumer, and we want to grow consumer demand not only here in the United States but elsewhere. So the breeding objectives for the program is to develop precocious and low alternate varieties with very high quality. We believe that we need to be looking for upright slender tree architecture so that we can go to high density planting, and we need very high fruit quality and long post-harvest shelf life. This will become more important as the California industry begins to export more fruit outside of the United States. So again, just to summarize, ultimate goal, enhance productivity, production efficiency so growers can make more money with less input, and we need to have satisfied consumers. So the future, Is it just one endless bowl of guacamole? I hope so, but I think we need to enhance industry viability, and we need to offer increasingly sophisticated consumers more choice. So we're very happy that we actually have a future. In early May, on May 1st, the University of California signed an agreement, a 3-year agreement with Eurosemias, a company based in Cordoba, Spain, to develop a partnership for both the variety and the rootstock programs. And for the variety program, we're anticipating to be releasing up to 4 varieties within the next 2 years. So we're very, very excited about this. So in the big picture for that, we have a range of both dark skin and green skin varieties that are comparable to CAS based on consumer data that we've already collected. And we have material that could potentially provide greater market coverage, improved tree architecture. These varieties are precocious and therefore will be more efficient and can be planted under high density. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric, who is going to talk about these new varieties.
You hear me now? Okay. Yes, thanks, Mary Lou. Let me put this in presentation mode. So a little bit of mind housekeeping before we get started. What we're interested here in our lab at UCR, obviously, is diversity in crops. But about 2 days ago, I heard about this thing going on. You may or may not be aware of it. We live in some interesting times right now. The Shutdown STEM and the shutdownstem.com links are about sort of academics' response to Black Lives Matter. So basically, if you're interested in this, I don't have a lot of time to go into it, but I thought I should mention it, especially for my academic colleagues. There's plenty of information if you follow the hashtag, or even if you go to their website. You know, I think we do a pretty good job at UCR with diversity, but as you know as well in life, if you're standing still, you're falling behind. So we have to keep moving forward. And
Eric,
yes?
Could you turn off your video? You're breaking up. Your audio is breaking up.
Okay, let me find a way to do that.
It's the bottom left, shut video. Thank you.
Okay, stop video.
Yeah, cool.
You got it now? Okay. Anyway, like I was saying, if you guys are interested, you could check out this hashtag day and the website. But now on to avocados. So let me, there we go. So Mary mentioned our program goals that we're looking to expand the environmental adaptability of the fruit, the tree, enhance yield potential, basically grow consumer demand. So in our case, in my case, the selection process, our initial selection is based on the fruit qualities. That's sort of what we know about. Later on in the process, we look at the tree quality, such as the upright architecture or other things like that, as well as just overall size. So therefore, we end up with a lot of diversity in eventual outcomes with tree architecture. So I'm going to address that a little bit, but Rodrigo's going to go more into that. But just keep this in mind as we talk about these fruit trees that we've developed. So Mary mentioned our sort of major objectives here. Looking for a narrow tree like this, you can see in the slide here in general. And we have these 4 varieties that she mentioned in brief. So basically, there's 4 UCR varieties that we're looking to potentially release in the next 2 years. I'm going to go through them in order here of their numbering here. So when we talk about these, the seasonality of these varieties is sort of as follows. This has shifted over time. I've noticed it in Irvine that trees seem to be earlier in some cases in the last 10 years, and we've shifted some of our expectations for these as far as when they can be harvested. This is a general good guideline, and you can see that UCR3 and UCR2 tend to be before HAS, maybe overlapping a little bit, but earlier, whereas UCR4 and UCR1 are more of a late season, although there is, again, some overlap there. So talking about UCR1, this is probably one of the ones we're most interested in initially. It is an upright fruit, an A-flower type. It has a dark, hass-like fruit. It's sort of traditional from our perspective in the breeding program, in that it's what we want as an upright tree, something that you can fit a lot of trees per acre. And it has a very Hass-like fruit in a similar size range. It generally, it's a late spring, summer fruit, although we started doing dry weights again this year, and there is the potential that it could be earlier than that. Our taste panels on this one started in March and went all the way through September, and it fared very well throughout that whole period. So it actually potentially could have a long season. It is an upright tree, as we said, tends to be a large tree, but it doesn't have a very big footprint. And so, well, the flesh, I'd say the fruit quality, it is rich, kind of meaty, perhaps something like a gem, if you're familiar with the texture of that flesh. It's an excellent fruit. The next variety I'll talk about is UCR2. This is one of the earlier varieties I mentioned. This tree has a different architectural type than UCR1. It does tend to be upright, but the wood is not as stiff. So you end up with trees growing upright, and if they get a large crop load, they tend to bend, and then next year you get another tree, another shoot going upright. So it has a sort of process where perhaps with some management, you could renew it into some sort of system of upright growth. But the main issue with this is a flower type like the previous one, and it's earlier than Hass. And it's a very interesting and good tasting fruit. I liken it to a certain point to having a texture somewhat lamb Hass, where it's a fruit that you can sort of slice and it holds its shape well. So perhaps for sandwiches or salad, the slicing fruit, yet it's not chewy. It still yields like you expect an avocado to. It's got a mild flavor, but a very small seed, and it peels very well. Tends to have a sort of reddish brown, rust-colored skin, a little lighter than Hass, but still darkens appreciably. So yes, this is like I said, the UCR2. The next variety I'm going to talk about is earlier than UCR2. This one, initially we thought this particular tree might have a fruit size that was too small. However, as the fruit and the trees have matured, I find this this one at UC, or at Irvine, South Coast Research Extension Center, tends to average around a size 60, I think, for the U.S. Growers. So actually, it's a pretty good fruit size. Mary Lou thinks of it as being a sort of a single serving size avocado. I personally eat a lot of avocado, so maybe one or two of these for me. But one of these, when you cut it, it could fit a sandwich very well. It's a very good quality fruit. Again, sort of somewhere between a Hass and a gem in texture. It's early. We start picking this in Irvine in November. And it's good through February into March. Again, these seasons and seasonalities differ by region. Things be formed differently in different areas. But in general, this is an earlier fruit. The thing that's interesting as well about it is this tree shape. It has this weeping, mounding, sort of sprawling tree shape. It's fairly vigorous, but the new wood is soft, so it does not tend to grow upright as much. It sort of droops out. This can actually make a little bit of an issue, I found, with picking it, because there's a lot of fruit on it and it tends to hang down close to the trunk. I'm really interested in this variety. We talk about different management techniques and strategies. I think this is something that could be managed on some sort of a trellis, or even like a kiwi fruit where you have it overhead and the fruit hanging down. I'm hoping at some point in the future we can engage in trials where we try these different techniques. I think this one has potential for a different style of management. Now we're talking about UCR4. This is an older variety. It's one of the last releases that will be coming out of Ray Martin and Dr. Berg's program. It's an upright, narrow tree, very small footprint. It's a bee flower type. So this one is also interesting in that you could potentially use it to pollinize Hass or gem. The flowering season overlaps very well with those varieties. And it's also a high quality fruit. So it's a dark skin fruit. It's definitely better tasting than Subtropical or baking. The seasonality is more of a gem seasonality, I would say, sort of late spring. But it's a very high quality fruit. I actually have been eating some recently. Black, nice sort of pear shape. And the tree, again, is small and it bears the fruit on the inside. So I'm looking forward to this one. This is definitely probably one of the first ones we will release in the next 2 years. So going back again over the sort of varieties here as a whole, this is again the seasonality we're looking at with them roughly. So we could use these different varieties to sort of spread a season out a lot more than just halves potentially or 2 varieties. And again, as Mary Lou said, the ultimate goal for us is not only the satisfaction of the consumer, but also an enhanced productivity and production efficiency, so that we have something that a farmer does not have to put as many inputs into for labor to harvest, or has some other different ideas. I mean, you know, with that UCR3 variety, if we grew it sort of on a trellis or something, perhaps that's the sort of mechanism or the style of management that you could actually use to encourage some sort of automation. I think it's difficult with the sort of traditional field and small growing trees, but if you manage them so that the fruit is in a specific area, automation or enhanced picking could really be something useful. So again, like I said, our selection process initially focuses on fruit quality. So we end up with a wide range of tree qualities and tree architectural types. I would say a lot of our material still tends to be in that sort of upright, traditional, high density direction that we've been looking, but we have a lot of other material too that if the industry decides to go in some different directions for management, we can hopefully adapt to that. So at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Rodrigo because he's going to talk about basically how a tree architecture works and potentially what we could look for in the future and what we're doing at UCR as well right now. If you have more questions about the fruit, you can ask on the Q&A and I can get into it later. But I wanted to save time for Rodrigo to get into his material. Thank you.
All right, let's jump right in. Can you guys hear me? Or Luke, can they hear me? All right, thank you. So when you think about the tree architecture and what should be the ideal tree architecture of the future, through the years, we've been thinking about overall shapes, like this is more or less round. Lamb is more triangular. Do we want that shape or maybe this shape? More pillar, cylindrical. What's the future also? Are we thinking about that round shape, more open one in terms of low density, while upright self-standing is more towards high density? Do we also want to get rid of the ladders to keep the trees to a human size or scale? Hopefully they're not watching the phone all the time, but like the guy there, but the scale of the trees, all those concepts are a mix that lead to the future of the avocado tree. Not precisely one silver bullet, but many things we're trying to hit. So the future will be a combination of genetics of the varieties and management of it. Let's keep has and its round shape over there as an initial example of the genetic side of things. This picture I took it like a week ago from our field station. Both are has, roughly 10 years old, both of them. Of course, they look very different, their size and how open the one on the left is compared to the one on the right. Turns out the one on the right just was heavily pruned a couple of years ago. So this is just a comeback regrowth, and this was not pruned. So it kept expanding laterally. So how that happens? What makes that shape to be? So let me bring the concept of this branching bias, lateral branching bias. This is a single shoot that is very vigorous. Usually you'll think of this as water shoots or the ones you want to get rid of, right? But this growth is just very fast, and despite this vigor, it will only release lateral branches towards what? Bias to what? To the sunlight exposure. So more laterals towards the sun or outer canopy, and the buds, the axillary buds here, will not release towards the trunk. So if we bring this behavior to the canopy, and of course I'm exaggerating the scale, but this sort of bias towards the outer branching instead of the inwards branching will eventually lead to this hash tree on the right to look like the one on the left. And not only the ability to hold or release lateral branches is involved here, it's the wood strength. How can you hold the structure without falling to the sides? Or you cannot, and it will just go down to the ground. So that behavior, it's part of has in this case. So what's the point? Is that the behavior of a single shoot, may that be a big one or smaller like this ones, are shaping that tree. The shoot influence the tree shape. Shoot behavior is where you can explain what you see in the big picture. So many different flushes, many different laterals racing from main axis, fruit presence, lack of it, will look different. Fruit location is also different. So if you think about shoots, putting them together, add some mulch and some sky and some other trees, you begin to understand that the shape of the trees is built by subunits, the smaller units, which is the shoot growth on a season. So we want to bring that to our breeding program. Is we tend to look at this overall tree shape, and we want to expand that to try to understand how it happened. How we can control that? What should we be looking at to select for different shapes? Different varieties just grow different. This blue section here is where the inflorescences are. Some are shorter, like an inch of length. Another varieties like Maluma will have longer, more separated inflorescences, which might link to bee visitations. The length of the first flushes, the colors are flushes. Where do they laterally release? It's different. Carmen just almost exhausts the main axis and raises two other ones at the second flush. Those differences have a genetic component. And that's the thing that Eri was talking about. We've been selecting for fruit quality, and luckily we have not been losing different growth behavior. So we have to harness that. I've been talking about genetics. I should have been saying genotypes, which is just the collection of all the DNA that gives the potential to grow differently. But what we see is actually built through the potential plus the influence of the environment. And you get the phenotypes, which is basically how the shoots are growing. How do we look for, how do we browse around all these genotypes we have for what are we looking for the phenotypes of interest? And first of all, you do what this group Marilu's has been doing for a while, is holding on and preserving genetics. I mean, different collections of varieties from back in the day to newer ones, and generating new ones to actually browse for this genotype, these phenotypes. And the other one is more with a purpose. You establish a mapping population, a place where you're gonna map what? You're gonna map shoot behavior, precocity, bloom behavior, A type, B type, and whatnot. So actually the picture behind us is what we recently planted. It is a mapping population. Members is some of them. We had an isolated block of BL516, Marvel, and Gem, and all the progeny. We studied it, we looked for cross-pollinated, and we planted it. And this is the map of our new planting, where we're gonna be looking for a couple of new varieties, but also we wanna mainly understand what shapes a tree as it is, what's involved in that. So what things could we be looking for? I mean, what do you do with this tool? This is when you need to know what are you looking for? What's the phenotype of interest? What growth habit you want to pursue that you're thinking ahead in the future, and we might need this behavior for self-standing high density, or what is necessary to make it easy on the growers to set up a trellis system, for example. I mean, we don't want to be limited. We want to expand choices for growers and consumers alike. So that picture is easy. It's some of the members of that 866 we end up planting, where, you know, just leave them alone and they go down, other ones remain upright. So that's an increasing rigidity gradient. And that links to the ability to, for example, hold this structure and not go down to the ground like CAS does. Even if you don't get rid of the bias, some varieties that we see, some of the seedlings we follow, they hold to this. They will remain searching for light, but they won't go down. Other ones will go down. We're looking also for varieties that will not care about the more shaded sections. All those things, you keep your eyes open, but let's just keep thinking about the increasing rigidity. I evaluated that, and luckily, in a mapping population from both parents, we have a segregation, we have a distribution of very flexible individuals to very rigid plantlets and everything in between. So we will be able to, hopefully in a more controlled manner, look for molecular markers or, you know, helpful tools for us as the breeding program to predict, oh, this tree will be an open tree because the wood is like this, the lateral branching is, the bias is like that. And both together and other concepts will allow us to tell you this is how it will more likely behave in the field or not. So this is what you're looking for type of approaches to the breeding program. So genome, I mean, this is the genetics part of it. They do different things and we can find them if we are looking for them. That was more or less the genetics part of it. Let's think of a little bit about the management. And I'm gonna go straight up to just talk about trellis because we've gathered some data and it just is something that is piquing my interest in, okay, is this worth it? What happens when you do this? So trellising, we gathered that the shoot complexity is increased when the variety is grown on a trellis system compared to a self-standing tree. That means shoots have more flushes and more laterals, and think of how that connects to the overall tree shape. So why do you want complexity? What's the purpose of that? And this is what I mean by complexity. 1 flush, 2 flush, 3 flushes, and lateral branches, for example, compared to a very simple, less complex or simplistic growth, just a single shoot. What do you want complexity? Because next year, because the next season, because of bloom, and bloom is fruits chances. So that's why you want to increase your complexity of the shoot growth, because you want to have the higher chances of bloom and fruit set later. So does it translate to actual harvestable fruit later while being trellis? So the data we gathered shows this, for example. I thought 1 fruit per shoot is normal, and that's why I'm showing the 2 fruits per shoot. I observed that on CAS 12% of the time. Maluma, 10% of the time. So it's very similar to find 2 fruits per shoot in both varieties. But Maluma and trellis, it was more than, you know, doubling that one. 22.5% of the time, I was able to find shoots with 2 fruits. So pictures like this, on a trellis, as you can see the wires, 1 shoot with 2 big fruits, 1 shoot with 2 big fruits is more likely. And that is an actual consequence that could have potential commercial implications. You get more fruit to the end than if you're having a self-standing tree. And that comes back to the complexity of the whole structure and the bloom potential. So why not think of a future that if you have an orchard profile like this, on the hillside, you may have a choice to have, let's say, high density self-standing trees. The more flat land, you might be thinking about building a structure like this type of trellis, or maybe, would you like to have the same variety and push that only through management and not genetics? It's unlikely. It will be unruly for one or the other style of production. you probably will have to do this. It's a mix of the genotypes that will be more fitting to one or the other, and the management you will learn, we will learn, and we will develop through time to minimize growers' input and maximize yield. So that's why we need you. That is why your input as growers, as PCA, as everything you see, all these eyes that are looking at these trees, even backyard trees, will have traits, we have ways to grow that might be the next big thing, in the sense of we should be looking for this shoot behavior, this fruit positioning, the length of the stalk of the fruit that is hanging so it doesn't touch the wire. So many things we've been missing by only solely focusing on how the whole tree looks. You have to understand the smaller unit to then understand the big one and have some sort of control. So this is what we want to ask you right now. I mean, we need your help, and we're going to put a poll right now for you guys. And hopefully you can pick, all of you can tell us what is the most important characteristics you would like to see on the new varieties, so we can think how you build that, and we can use our collective thoughts together with your information to reduce that into what are we looking for, which is the phenotype. And then we'll take it from there. So please do this for us. It will be extremely helpful, and we'll be working with this. So please go ahead. Fruit quality, it's, I mean, all of us can comment, but I'm happy to see fruit quality is a very important thing. It's actually Marilu's decision all along. I always like, when I got here 11 years ago, it was interesting to me to think that fruit quality was one of the main goals to preserve, because it's the final consumer connection. You actually want to give them a good stuff that they want to buy again and again. And so that I'm happy to see that, and also happy to see that tree architecture, it's what we're thinking of focusing, is building tree architectures with a purpose is what we're looking for. And turns out alternate bearing is connected. I show you that complexity leads to higher chances of next season bloom and fruit potential. So the idea is to understand that alternate bearing is related to how shoots grow. And varieties that are more constant, they keep complexity through time, while other ones will not be able to do that, and they will remain simplistic when they have too much fruit. So that's my comments on the big three I see here.
So can I make a comment?
Of course.
I'm happy to see fruit quality too, but one of the things that we've entered the era of using genetic markers to speed up breeding. But unfortunately with avocados, we're not quite there yet. We don't have the markers because we've only just now gotten the genome. So we also are going after tree architecture, because we know it's related to alternate bearing, but also we know that the genes that control architecture are probably more easy to identify and then use in a selection program. Whereas fruit quality, I think if we did a poll on fruit quality, we would have all kinds of ideas of what fruit quality is. And so that means that there's probably many genes that are controlling fruit quality. And so that's a much harder nut to crack for the future. I think it's something we have to think about for the future, but defining fruit quality is very, very difficult. We know that we want something good to eat. We know texture. There's a lot of genes that control texture, a lot of genes that control the flavor, the development of the aromatic compounds that are important for the flavor of the avocado. And so that is going to be a much harder thing to achieve through marker selection. And we're going to have to stick with the old-fashioned way of giving fruit to a lot of people and getting feedback on how good they are or not good.
Correct. I mean, tree architecture, how things grow, it's, although it has not been done focusedly before, the whole idea of what you're looking for is easier in that sense. And when you know what you're looking for, you can find molecular tools to mark that and follow it. The experience of eating something good, which we are calling fruit quality, is very different for all of us. So it's less objective. That's why it's so complicated, and that's why so many genes are involved compared to a lateral branching position, which should be easier than fruit quality. But the fruit quality is the final product. So they're all connected and all are challenging. And I see also fruit seasonality, stress tolerance. Of course, we're keeping that, we're thinking that, and Patty Manosalva will be probably talking about tolerance on the rootstock side. Heat and cold, if we're thinking about tolerance to physical stress, environmental stresses, is related to expanding growing areas. And we have ways to control that externally with structures and technology, but also by what should we be looking for, what do we want from a tree so it tolerates better heat. You know, it's transpiring a lot, cooling off itself when it shouldn't be. That will be useful commercially, maybe not physiologically, but there's a balance between commercial side and, you know, a perfect physiology for a tree, and those not necessarily are beneficial together. So eyes open, and always hearing you guys. Thank you for answering the poll.
So I have a series of questions that have been asked while the presentations have been made. And before we take a little break, I'd like to see if we can answer some of those. So these are really tough tough questions. What can you expect of yield from the gem variety? Anyone want to try that?
Oh, I think that if you have the right rootstock, and of course that's a big question, what is the right rootstock for gem? We don't know. But if you have the right rootstock and you could count on getting 20 to 25,000 pounds per acre. I believe that, because they can load the fruit on. I think part of it is not holding the fruit too late. I know that some people think that they can hold the fruit into the fall. I wouldn't necessarily do that, but I think if you have a balanced fruit removal program by size, we have the right rootstock, which is, I think you could count on getting 20 to 25,000 pounds per acre on a conservative basis. I think you could potentially go higher, but I think it is higher. The data we have from all the sites from those old top working trials definitely show the gem is more productive.
So that leads into the next question. How much adaptation does the grower require when they move from Hass to gem or Maluma or lamb Hass? How do they have to approach a new variety when they're growing it?
That's a great question. Well, I think something like gem and lamb Hass, you know, they're more adapted to high density. So you're going to plant trees at a higher, plant trees at a higher density. I think both those varieties can easily be grown on a 12 by 12, 12 by 15, 10 by 10 spacing. Now, does that mean you can plant the trees and walk away? No, we have to, and this is what we don't know, is how do we actually prune these things? There's been, really no effort in this industry for many, many years to understand tree pruning. And we have to go to our friends from Chile and our friends from South Africa that are doing tree management. I know they got plant growth regulators that we don't have, but we can learn from what those people are doing. But we, as an industry, need a concerted effort to learn how to manage these new varieties. As Eric indicated, I think.
Is my audio working?
Yes.
Okay.
Your audio.
Couldn't be, I wasn't clear about earlier. I mean, to sort of tag on to that question, I would I would say that, you know, some of the varieties you mentioned, like Gem or Lamb or even UCR1 or UCR4, you could manage those in a similar method to Hass, just at a higher density. But there are other directions that we could be going, and some of the other varieties might go in those directions better, or even potentially Gem or Lamb or these other standard varieties could be more flexible. So it depends. I'd say, you know, you could grow them somewhat the same as Hass, or you could try something different. You have options.
Which leads into another question of a similar nature. These trials are at different sites, San Diego, Ventura, Santa Barbara, San Joaquin Valley. Is there a sense now with all these different trials, is there a difference requirement for nitrogen, for boron, for zinc, for water? Does Maluma require more water or less? Is it more heat tolerant than Gem? Is there a sense, even though these are on different trials, of the differences in requirements of nutrition and water?
Okay, well, you mentioned Maluma. We don't know about Maluma in California, but I've seen Maluma in Peru, I've seen Maluma in Spain, I've seen Maluma in Israel, and I've seen Maluma in South Africa. And I've seen it the most in South Africa. So if you go to the area of Zanin, in the main part of Zanin where most of the avocados are, the highest percentage of avocados are grown in South Africa, where you've grown around Zanin, which is a high rainfall area, the Maluma does quite well. They have the Mokitsi Valley, which is just north of the Zanin area. It's a hotter, drier climate. And there, I think the Maluma is doing a little bit better than Hass in terms of growth. And there's a lot of acreage of Maluma grown there. I have hopes that it might be a variety that we can grow in the San Joaquin Valley, but I don't know. I think, but you know, until we have trials and trees are very limited, we won't know. We won't know. And as an industry, we probably need to be having trials where they're planted in such a way that you can do these comparisons. When I took over the breeding program in 1996 and we established those top working trials, we let the growers manage the trees as they saw fit. They all were top working trials. And so they were on the margins or in the interior of Hass groves. And so they were managed like the Hass. We do know a little bit, Lamb Hass, in my opinion, Eric and Rodrigo may disagree, but Lamb Hass to me is a pretty much of a tree that can grow in a lot of different situations. Gem, I think, is a little bit more finicky. I think if you have high soil pH, we've had trouble with the Gem. The Gem tends to go more chlorotic than other varieties. And so it's a little bit more finicky, which is similar to its mother, the Gwen. Eric, you wanted to say something?
No, I agree. I mean, and actually, I mean, yeah, Gem is we had a little bit of issues with salinity and high soil pH with that one, but it definitely, you know, there's a range in our selections. I've seen tier 2 stuff. So we have 3 tiers. Tier 1's the initial, tier 2 is sort of the first selection, and tier 3 is what we've been talking about. It's the regional trials. And there's material in tier 2 that has definitely, I've noticed, a strong calcareous soil response. But then some of the stuff we have in tier 3, actually, I think the UCR3 seems to really be fairly unfazed by the high salinity water we have at South Coast. And that variety in particular seems to be able to handle a little better. So different varieties have different tendencies. You know, we have a lot of range in response in what we produced.
Yeah, I mean, we've been operating the variety program under very limited funding, and my hope had been 6 years ago to have large regional trials. But because of funding issues, we were not able to pursue that. So we need more information. We need growers that are interested in putting out some trials with this material so that we can get better information.
Okay, this is Patricia Manosalva. She's with Plant Pathology, Microbiology and Plant Pathology Department at UC Riverside, and she is in charge of the avocado rootstock breeding program. So Patty, tell us what you know about rootstocks.
So good morning. So for those who hasn't known me, I'm Patricia Manosalva. I'm in the Department of Microbiology and Plant Pathology, and a plant pathologist by training. And today I just want to give an overview of where we are in the rootstock development, especially for disease resistant and salinity rootstock. You can see here my name, but also Peggy and Marilu, because we start like as a team, because as everybody of you know, maybe not know, I joined the program in 2015 when I took the program over Greg Duhan, and I have avocados when I was in Peru, but I never worked with it. So as it has been a 5 years of learning process, learning from Marilu, from Peggy, from growers, from Ben. So I think we have done a very good progress, and I hope I can update you on the 5 advanced rootstocks that we're trying to release between these next 3 years. So I have my email address here, so you will have, I guess, posted in the CAS website and also in the seminar, so you can send me an email if you have any questions on my presentation. Okay, so first, if I run out of time, I wanted to introduce my team. Currently, we're only down to 2 students because everybody have moved or have switched to programs, but I have two graduate students. Well, I have 3. I used to have 3 graduate students in 2015. Roger graduated, and I will present some of his data. Natasha and Aidan still currently, hopefully, this is the year that they will finish. Brandon, most of you have been, probably know Brandon. He's been working for all over the years since with Mangi and Greg Duhan. So he was my right hand on the field trials. Most of the data that you will see is from him. And recently is from Aidan and I and Marilu that we've been looking and writing the plots until I can replace Brandon, because Brandon, just to let you know, is now working in citrus. And then Nirwala, who also was helping in the breeding program. So I just want to start with this because I think it's a good idea that to show that we know the marker or the productivity of production of avocado is growing worldwide, but Mexico has been always the top one, but we have been losing marker. You know, in 2006 and 2010, US avocados were top 2 supplying avocados in the world. And now, 2018, we are within the number 8 or 10. So we need to recover the market. We need to gain productivity, not only to supply domestic crop, but also to be able to regain the market. So how we do that? We do it like with better rootstocks, better science, and the perfect combination from the countries or the regions or the states. So what we need to do, we need to do research, and we need to work together, scientists and also growers, like Marilu and Eric and Rodrigo mentioned. It's very important that we work together so we find these good rootstock, good varieties, and the very strong rootstock and scion combinations. So I just want to point out that this is programs that there has been historically funded in the UCR by you guys through the California Avocado Commission. We recently get in partnership with, like Marilu said, Eurosemillas from Spain to continue the research. We also have federal funding. So we need to move avocado research to get these perfect combinations and perfect varieties who works for different regions and different countries. So this program starts with George St. Meyer, which is actually I will say the responsible that we have a least rootstock breeding program, and we have a very, between the Zion and the Marilu and the program on the rootstock, we have probably the largest germplasm collection, and I will go into that, what is important to have this material. And he started the program. The program have several predecessors in my department, John Mangi and Greg, and now I took the program over 2015. So I just wanted to be sure that, you know, and I think that's the take-home message that Marilu and I wanted to give probably today, and Eric and Rodrigo, is that we have to look for diversity. Diversity meaning no be a monoculture, no either using one single variety or one single rootstock, because it's very dangerous. I mean, we have disasters with monoculture, you need cyanosis, you need rootstock. Now we all know, and there is a lot of research that even Marilu has published, that there is a rootstock science influence. There is a rootstock and scion influence in yield, in tree size, tree architecture, and alternate bearing. So, and the perfect example is some of this variety, like, you know, when I joined the program, I heard a lot of stories, but this is one of the stories that even colleagues in South Africa told me about the release from this, or the potential of this Martin Grande, that was very resistant to Phytophthora root rot, but when you actually tried in the field with CAS, it was a poor producer. So then that's what it is important to be able to test these rootstocks in not only with CAS, but we should test it with the varieties that are available and fits your orchard. So can I let you know the evolution and the availability of the rootstock through the nurseries in the present time? So currently you can find all these available rootstocks in commercial nurseries. Everything in the program starts with Duke 7, that is a Mexican rootstock. And then Duke 7, as you will know in my later slide, has been the godfather of several of our collections. And then we have the release of Thomas, and there was a Toro Canyon who was a escape tree for one of the growers. And then there is the Martin Grande story and all these rootstocks. However, the ones that are available is Dusa, who is probably considered the California standard, which is from South Africa. Uzi, Segmeyer, and Stedon are the ones that Greg Duhan released in 2013, I think. Now, you see these three rootstocks, we know, and I can tell they are highly resistant to Phytophthora. But in case of Segmeyer, because they being a seedling of a highly susceptible salinity rootstock, Segmeyer, it is not feedable for a high salinity conditions, even if they have a high resistance to Phytophthora root rot. Stedon, mother, is Toro Canyon, which some of you are reusing because their tolerance to salinity. And Segmeyer has similar tolerance probably than Toro Canyon. Unfortunately, when I joined the program, there were no Stedons in the field. And then with Marilu, we put actually a rootstock that I'm going to talk today in Pine Tree, in Santa Paula, and also in Fallbrook, replicated trees with these rootstocks. And then you probably have been hearing about this Tammy, Miriam, and Ben Jacob Israeli rootstocks that I think Broca have available. I don't know, maybe I'm mistaken, but that's what I just wanted to briefly touch on these ones because you might be able to access these new rootstocks. So Tammy, it was used to call BCA01, and Miriam is what it used to call BC218. Ben Jacob, I think, is BC66. What I wanted to point out is that, okay, I'm going to go back to them to tell you a little bit more about those. But I know there is a lot. I think that the key is that we have like a manual and something that we can work with growers and we can work with farm advisor is so you know all the information that you need to know for the rootstock to make an informed decision. So in the case of the ones that are available, you can see in this table is we have the race because we have been using genetic tools to understand the genetic composition of our material. Because if we don't know that, we cannot work blindly for selecting or breeding or doing anything that we want to trying to understand your needs and meet your needs. Okay, you want salinity resistant, you want resistant to heat, or so we need to know that genetic information, because ultimate genetic environment is what it makes the phenotype of a specific accession. So what we have in here is what we know where the mother is. We know also the genetic information of the mother, but the most important that you as a grower should know and nurseries should be having available from us is the phenotype, okay? So you will see when I talk about the filters that we have done, what we are doing, we are doing, and we will continue doing. We gather informations about the conditions of the soil, the condition of the water, if they have Phytophthora, observations like, okay, if there are some of them cold tolerance, heat tolerance, if they are good for clay soils. So all this information and even the fields that we have been tested, the years, it can be available because we can put together a manual, but that has to be an effort between scientists, nurseries, and farm advisors. So we can put out that kind of manual. We also have information, well, recently, I don't have information after I joined, but from 2015, at least we can get the information with the grower cooperators, with our grower cooperators that have been wonderful on their management practices, because I know there is no one single managed practices. Every one of you have different ways that you manage your trials, and that's what all the trials that I'm going to talk today, most of them are on CAS because most of you grow CAS. So all of them are on CAS and all of them are on different management strategies. Some of you use potassium phosphate, some of you use gypsum, some of them you mulch, some of them you don't. So all that information on our trials are available. So we can actually start making a compendium or a manual, sort of, between researchers, due information, and farmer advisors, and provide this to the nurseries. So I want to go back to this new Rootstock that they are going to be available or soon available from Botany Institute from Israel. So this Miriam and Tammy are used to call BC 218 and A01. Now, what I pointed out here is that I wanted to mention and give credit to researchers at UC and growers at California on this line, including DUSA. Those were originated from South Africa and from Israel, but the research evaluating those materials in California are done in collaboration with you guys and with scientists in my department, like John Mangi. So John Mangi and Greg Duhan have been evaluating this material, and you can see here in this slide, the materials have been evaluated in Southern California and Northern California. Now you can see that those new two that it will be available rootstock have been mostly tested in Southern California. So for Northern California, like Ventura, or I don't know, what you want to call, but so they are not that there were not many field trials, but in general, the conclusion in 2011, and you can see that information available in the internet, because this is a 5-year or final report that Greg did, and he compiled all the information, and you have information of harvest and everything in locations, but I just put this one as the summary of these two rootstock. Miriam and Tammy are both West Indian times Mexican in structure, in race composition, but you can see that they were evaluated 5 AGRs, 3 locations and 6 locations, probably most in the Southern California, San Diego and Riverside, and you can see their phenotype on soil tolerance as a highly tolerant and resistant to Phytophthora tolerant. And I wanted to go about that because the terms of resistance for Phytophthora is relative, because these studies were done like 10 or 20 years ago. You have to think that pathogens don't have also a fixed population. Pathogens evolve and pathogens change. And the population of Phytophthora that was even last year, it might be different to this year. And I wanted to go back to some slide to give you my take-home message on that. But I wanted to put that information so you are available. And if you are planning to get those rootstocks, you can have some information on how these ones work in California. Now, as growers and we as a scientists know that California probably faces a lot of challenges. Okay, some countries only have probably Phytophthora, but they don't have salinity yet. But I think California is a pool the happy place to breed avocados for several constraints, because we have them probably all. We have Phytophthora root rot, we have salinity problems, we have drought problems, we have heat problems. We have all our probably rootstock trials are evaluated under high alkalinity due to calcium carbonate, like hard water, high pH, amount like 8 sometimes. And we have some growers that has problems with drainage of the soil, clay soils with high saturations. So there are the different phenotypes that we can pursue in the breeding program. And like similar to Marilu, I have a couple of questions that I wanted to answer at the end so it can guide us on what we should prioritize, because like Marilu said, avocado selections, and it takes over like 15, 20 years. So we have to prioritize what people, what the industry needs. So we have in collaboration with Tim Spahn from the California Avocado Commission, we did a survey in 2018, and then 70 of you guys answered, growers, and thanks so much. And we will keep doing this once yearly. And it was clearly that your 3 priorities back in 2018 was salinity, drought, and Phytophthora root rot resistant. But there were a lot of interest for dwarfism, probably because you, like Marilu said, you wanted to have a tree who allowed you to do high density planting. People also are interested on heavy soil adaptation and high pH. So that this kind of response will help us to guide our program. So in our case, the general goals of the UCR rootstock is provide you alternative of different varieties of rootstock that can improve the avocado production by reducing the yield and reducing your inputs. So what is needed to do that is a genetic pool. You know, we need a group of plants that we call germ plants collection, because this is the heart, or without this material, we cannot do anything. So we need the ability for us to be flexible on the breeding, or be ready to prepare for, like, okay, we have laurel wheel. Okay, this was a disease that is wiping out the industry. I'm going to touch a little bit on that. So if we have in our genetic pool or our plant germ plus accessions who are resistant to laurel wheel, we can prepare and we can start selecting for it. So this is really important. And this is a slide that I copied from one of the Marilu presentation. So you can see that avocado have 3 races: Mexican, Guatemalan, and West India. And each race have different specific characteristics and traits in the fruits. And for example, in cold tolerance and salinity. You know, in terms of salinity, Mexicans are probably the ones who have less salinity tolerance or resistance, while West Indians have the most. So the ability of know these basic traits that these 3 races give you will allow us to shape or select in our breeding programs. So this is a work that is in preparation. It was done by my assistant, Dr. Abe Sakara. And we, at the beginning, we decided to know what kind of material we have. Are we prepared to be our program flexible and address all your needs? And then I'm glad to see that we have a very good material that we can start, and that's what we are working with all these years. You can see that we have, so I'm just going to briefly tell that you can see this, each color is different, is indicated here. So we have we have accessions who are pure races. We have the 3 races. We have in the germ plus a lot of the hybrids, because, you know, it's highly heterozygous. So we have all the combinations, and we have this pool that is in brown that is actually have all the races combination. Now, you know, like when a dog, a purebred dog is more susceptible to everything. It's the same on human nature and plants. You know, as more genetic diversity that you have, a more heterozygous you are. I don't know, my English words are sometimes, but I think you call them mod, or like, no, like pure race, you are more resilient to a lot of stresses. So this is the kind of material that we are trying to favor, you know, and taking advantage of the knowledge of what we know about the phenotypic of each race. So in the germplasm for the rootstock, we have in total from UC that we have been selecting 192 accessions of different races. So we have some data, or some of them for salinity, cold, and drought. And I'm going to mostly talk about 5 of them and how the results of our field evaluations are having that they might be ready to be released in the couple next years. And this is the 5 rootstocks that hopefully we can get it out in the next 3 years. And we always run our California standard, which is DUSA currently. This is the information of the race. Some of them are pure Mexican, some of them are Mexican and Guatemala. I want to tell that all of these 5, all of the root material that has been developed by UC, the base trait that we get it out is resistant to Phytophthora. Because, like I said, Phytophthora root rot is caused by Phytophthora cinnamomai, which is a highly invasive pathogen. So every place probably that you will grow avocado, you will have Phytophthora cinnamomai over there, because it's a highly invasive, ubiquitous pathogen. And so all the selections that will come out from the program will have a good resistance for this pathogen. Then some of them have salinity tolerance, some of them might have heat tolerance. In this case, this is the tolerant and moderate tolerant for salinity. We have one PP45, which is susceptible, which for me is okay, because if you don't have problems of salinity, of other country doesn't have problem of salinity, but it have highly problems with replanting because of Phytophthora root rot, this rootstock can be ideally, because it's highly resistant. All of them are flower type B, and under my directorship, we have 4 years of field data in different conditions. I wanted to briefly say that we have several rootstocks, new rootstocks, that there are like all these combinations of races that we need to test it, because they mostly are resilient to several stresses, but we need to put it in the field, and we will start doing new field trials starting next year. So please, if you are interested on testing all of these new, because we don't have any field data on these varieties. So if you are interested to take a risk and help us with this, please shoot me an email. And I just briefly tell you, yes, it takes 15 years to be able, or more, to be able to release a variety from this, a rootstock, and also for the variety from the beginning up to the field testing, because we can speed up this process with research, but we can never bypass the field testing, because we need to testing at the small level like we have been doing. And recently, in the last 5 years, we start doing this semi-commercial evaluation. So allow you to do a pre-adoption of the rootstocks and grow them in your orchard for like more than 100 trees per accession. So we can actually have a better information on how really these rootstocks will work. But we start from a fruit selection. We have to prioritize maternal sources, prioritize this combination of races using our genetic markers. We have greenhouse screening, when we will screen all the seedlings for Phytophthora. With Peggy Ma, we're doing salinity. We did some drought experiment with a colleague from Botany and Plant Science. And then we always use a control also, because you have to use the most resistant control that is available for these stresses with the most susceptible. So whatever we select is better than those ones that we already have. Then it goes to the collection to get enough material that it will take 2 or 3 years to get badwood to provide to do our field test. So in general, we're talking about 15, 20 years of research. And why you have to monitoring pathogen population? Well, every country, and even within regions and within the state, have different pathogen population. And I'm not going to talk too much about that, but my research team also look at the evolution of the genomics of this pathogen. It's an amazing pathogen, and the problem is that people think that you will have forever the same Phytophthora cinnamomai in your field, and that's not true. Okay, so we have a lot of imports of avocados from Mexico, and they have their own pathogen population that sometimes is more virulent and more resistant to potassium phosphide than some of our isolates. So we always have to monitor in the pathogen population, because I wanted to be able to select resistance that is sustainable and effective against whatever it might come to California. So you can see here that what we know now in the population on avocados is that there are different groups of these pathogens. What you just pay attention is that these red and blue groups, the blue group was a group of pathogens that we find that they are more resistant to potassium phosphide, and then also there are more virulent on DUSA and the available rootstock. So we need to know the pathogen population to be able to give you or breed or develop the best rootstock resistant to, a different wide range of pathogens. And we have actually 300 isolates in our collection, mainly from US and from avocado, but we will increase this one with a new funding that I have to do this kind of research only on the pathogen side. And then my student who graduated in 2018, he did a very interesting research on pathogens, and that will give you some information, because while we are giving you the rootstock, you have to manage your orchard, and you have to manage your orchard informed. Know what chemical are you going to plant and what rootstocks you need to plant. So what we did is we start looking some of the phenotypic traits of these pathogens in terms of virulence and in terms of potassium phosphide and other chemical fungicide availability. And you can see clear that these new more aggressive pathogens of Phytophthora cinnamomai are also less sensitive to potassium phosphide. Most of you use potassium phosphide and phosphonates chemical treatment. And higher values of this EC50 means that the pathogen is more resistant to your chemical. And you can see a big difference on these two different populations of the pathogen, being one population that is very sensitive to phosphonates and a population who is highly or insensitive or becoming insensitive and hopefully not resistant to this chemical. Okay, and what about virulence with the rootstocks that are available? So if you make a mix, of these isolates, the red and the blue, and you inoculate the current rootstocks, you can see that if you, this group that they are mainly located in Southern California, you can see that they are very aggressive on the rootstocks. So you have DUSA, this is one of our susceptible checks, and the three latest rootstocks and Thomas. Now remember, and most of you remember that Thomas 8 years ago, even I wasn't here, was your standard as a resistant. And now Thomas is highly susceptible. And not many of you are growing Thomas because they are not doing good under high Phytophthora conditions, and they are highly susceptible to salinity. So you cannot get fixed to a rootstock or a scion because environment change, pathogen change. So you need to be more flexible. And I know it's hard because you have to invest on your orchard for years. So that's what is good that we do this development or this trying to see or oversee what is going to come here as a challenge for California. I just wanted to briefly mention that because I know there will be some new chemicals coming on from Phytophthora, and we did this work with Gina Daskavich in my department, who is a specialist and expertise in fungicide, and we compare all 71 isolates throughout California and do this in vitro and greenhouse tests. And bottom line, available for treatment of Phytophthora is potassium phosphate and mefenoxam, which is Ridomil. But you can see that in the case of potassium phosphate, you can see that there are Phytophthora strains that are not very sensitive to this chemical. So the new chemical that is already in registration and it might come out is oxathiopropyrin, which is Orondis, and it's very good for controlling Phytophthora cinnamomai, but there are also in the pipeline other ones. But the take-home message that I wanted to tell here if this is some of the greenhouse plot, is that if you compare the treatment of this chemical in a susceptible and a tolerant rootstock like DUSA or resistant rootstock like DUSA, using the most virulent or problematic isolates or the more resistant isolates, you can see that potassium phosphate gives you some protection, but this Orondis and the other chemicals has way better if you use a tolerant rootstock. So which it means, the message that I wanted to tell you is that you need to use a tolerant rootstock. You have to use a chemical, but when you use a chemical like potassium phosphate, which is the only available, trying to rotate, because the reason why there are strains of Phytophthora who are insensitive to this potassium phosphate is because you are using it too much that the pathogen become resistant. It's like when you take antibiotics, you take the same antibiotics, you get resistant. So I just wanted to briefly take that whole message. Wherever you get the new chemicals trying to rotate, and that's something that your farm advisor can help you with how you can do rotations on chemicals to treat Phytophthora. Well, now, from now and then, I will only talk about rootstock, but I just wanted to mention as a plant pathologist, it's important for me give you the best information so you can manage your orchards. So, as I mentioned, we have 5 rootstocks that it will be available hopefully soon. Some of them are available in growers if you want to take the risk of semi-adopting those, and I will mention that at the end. But something that we're doing is we are doing all this rescreening under the greenhouse and with the current pathogen population. So we are sure that with our controls, we have the best resistance. For example, you can see here the 3 rootstocks are similar or even better than what we have right now in terms of Phytophthora and with the current population of the pathogen. You can get this article in the internet. This is an article published by Mary Lou and Peggy when they make a salinity trial, and we evaluate they evaluate some of the rootstocks that they are available, including PP40, which is PP45, which is coming to be available. And the take-home message is the PP40 that we are evaluating more. It has some good salinity tolerance, similar to DUSA, and also has a good percentage of survival. So we have salinity tolerant rootstock that it will come out like PP40. Then we also have some rootstocks. We also have been evaluated by heat, because some of you are concerned about heat tolerance. And if you can see here, this is all our, so a group of our rootstocks. We were scoring them, and we have different groups. You can see the whole, from the most resistant to the more susceptible. And you can see here, we have a pool of rootstocks that they are, seems to have some kind of like highly tolerance to heat. And for my preliminary information say that most of this one has a high amount of Mexican composition. Another thing that we have been looking in the rootstock program is the adaptation to clay soils, because I'm very interested in that too, because I heard that DUSA, it doesn't do well in heavy soils or clay or soils that they are prone for any standing water or flooding. So this is just a graph that's showing you tree mortality in one of our plots. So this plot, pretty much when I inherited, when I took this plot pretty much every tree that was there was dead. And I was like, okay, this cannot be because of the rootstock, but it has to be something on the soil. And what happened is that these plants, our rootstocks, were planted between 2 big old trees from the grower. So all the water was flooding our trees and the trees were dying. And this is the tree mortality that we have. You can see that there is 100%, almost 100% of tree mortality in DUSA, but we have this latest rootstock like 84, 86, and 90, which is latest rootstock, which we don't have information. We haven't put it in regional trials, but you can see that PP90, for example, it has 50% of mortality. This is some of the trees. It has flowers, and last year I was there, some of them start having fruit. So we probably need to invest more in these new rootstocks for the cases of these heavy soils. So I'm going to talk about field rootstock evaluation. So we have so far 11 plots in all these regions in collaboration with growers. Before we, like I mentioned before, we have information of the soil characteristics. So we have Phytophthora cinnamomum problems. We have evaluating those rootstocks under high pH, high calcium carbonate, high salinity, and high chloride. Because some plots, you will see they have a no high salinity in terms of EC values, but they have a higher amount of chloride, which gives the plant chloride toxicity. And then there is one plot that we put in 2017 with Nick in San Diego, Fallbrook, that actually is growing under 10 by 10 feet. So it's like we can call them like high density, and Nick is an organic grower. So we're going to show some of that data. So we kind of have a score that we're trying to share with a lot of like scientists or that want to follow up our scores, so we kind of uniformize the scores of 0 being the perfect looking tree and 5 being the dead. So if you see in the graph that I'm going to show lower scores, meaning that those are the best trees, okay? So I want to take opportunity to show the plots that I have for Ramona on Tom's Royden ranch, and I was so sad last year, couldn't go to her memory, but I just want to get the opportunity to thank you so much for having so much fight time, knowing him and learning a lot from him. So we have 2 plots with him, and his field have no Phytophthora, but it has high pH. It have higher EC values, so high salinity, but it have high of chloride. So it's very toxic on chloride. And we have, in his plot, we actually have our latest selections. So it's a perfect place to evaluate for what is coming to being tolerant or resistant to salinity and high chloride toxicity, and pH, because his pH is high. And you can see that we always have DUSA as reference, and we have several of these new GDs that they are looking very promising. Now, these ones won't be available soon within the 5, but I just wanted to show you because we are going to start putting more trials with these rootstocks. So if you guys are interested, again, shoot me an email and we can start planning some of the regional trials. So this is the yield on Tom's field from 2016 and 2018, again, comparing with DUSA, some of the GD under these conditions and doing pretty well. So like, for example, GD11, GD1, these PPs. So we wanted to put those ones on more trials. You can see there have been even some of them better than DUSA under this harsh condition of chloride and salinity. We have, like I say, we put with Marilu a trial, and this is a trial that Marilu is overseeing. When we put a replicated trials of different rootstock, including some of the ones that we are going to release in 2 regions, in Bonsal, Fallbrook, and Santa Paula. And this is the data from 2018, and you can see that there is, in the terms of both, there are different, because you can see lower score is the best, higher score is the worst. And you can see that Bonsal in Fallbrook, comparing with DUSA, we have some of our accessions are better. Now, Marilu has the 2019 information that I didn't put it in here, but the bottom line is that these accessions are doing comparable to DUSA, or sometimes better than DUSA. So this is the hit of the raise from salinity. So this is in, let's look at Bonsal. So this is DUSA. So you can see here that some of these are doing okay. The PP35, PP40 are the ones that we know they have salinity tolerance, and there are the ones, the next generation of the rootstock that we are hoping to release. And there are also 42 and 45, which is, we know there is not that good for salinity, especially 45. So I think PP80 is one of also our favorites for resistance and salinity. And we have, this is too early to tell, but we have some harvest data from May 2019. And you can see like rootstock from PP35 start producing some fruits. We have to get the data. Marilu is coordinating to get the data for this year. And this is how the looks back to 2018, 17. And I wanted to show that we have also an environment. So this is the same replicated trial. And you can see that in October 2017, these trees looks different on their, between Santa and Focht. And I think Marilu has doing field trials in there. And you can see there's a big difference on sizes of the tree. So I just wanted to point out these are the 5 new rootstocks that we're trying to release, and we are now under evaluation, all comparable with DUSA. You can see here, this is the tree health and soil burn ratings, again with 0 and 5 score. And you can see that comparing with DUSA on tree health and salinity, our PP40s and PP35, at least in this location in Gunderson, in Santa Paula, we have similar behavior than DUSA. How about tree mortality? If we compare the tree mortality of DUSA, PP40, PP45 and PP42 in this plot seems to have less mortality. What about the yield in pounds? So if this is DUSA on the years from 2016 and 2019, you can see that PP40 is similar, so it's doing pretty good, PP45 and PP42. So Jim Brown, we have, this is a plot in Santa Paula, we have plots in Southern California under high salinity conditions. And then we can have here that, again, the scores of some of our rootstocks. In this case, we have 40, 42, 45, and 35. And you can see that comparable with DUSA, now you can see that this one have higher score, but statistically, there is no significant with DUSA. Only PP44 is more susceptible in this case to salinity in this plot because it has an asterisk. So statistically significant, only 42, the rest behave similar to DUSA. What about tree mortality in this plot in the south? So PP40, this is PP45. So our rootstocks really don't have high mortality comparing with DUSA. And also we've been evaluating for heat damage. And this is something that we start doing in this plot. So I think in 2018, all of you remember there was a lot of, it was very hot and a lot of you guys have lost the crop because of this heat. So we were evaluating this heat damage in that time. Marilu and Brandon evaluate those trees, and you can see here that PP80 is one of the best rootstocks. Now, all of these ones are on CAS, so at least PP80 with CAS, it gives you good salinity ratings. Sorry, heat ratings. So it's probably PP80, it has some tolerance to heat too. And the next wet performance was 42, and the other one's 45. And the ones who did not like it probably have the highest performance, bad performance under heat was Thomas, DUSA, and this BCA04. So bottom line, PP80 and 35 and 45 might have some tolerance to salinity because they were the best looking trees in the south at that time of heat. So how about the yield? So if we do cumulative yield on this plot, over years, you can, oh sorry, my lines probably move, but this one should be by DUSA. No, it is by DUSA. So if we compare the yield all these years in this plot with these rootstocks, so you can see that PP45 did pretty good, and PP40 also, it was not significantly different from DUSA. And PP35, so they are producing under these conditions. This one is another plot in Jim Brown in the same location, similar location. Again, the ratings for salinity and overall health of the tree were similar to DUSA in terms of PP40, PP80, which is in salinity, especially the ones that we're trying to release. And this is the yield. We only have yield for 2018. because before it did not produce. Is one of the, I don't remember what year was plotted. I have to look at my data, but you can see that PP40 and 80, it produced similar to DUSA. So at least we know that, that these 5 rootstocks, that they have extra phenotype, like some more heat resistant. They either, some fields they behave better than DUSA, or that are similar than DUSA. And this is some pictures, like this is a picture from Peggy from Nagos between DUSA and PP40 when she did the salinity trial. PP40 was having some salinity tolerance as DUSA. This is DUSA and PP35 in Ventura. This is also in Agos, it's a picture. And I wanted to mention something here. And Marilu said, we want rootstocks who are not very vigorous, because it might have an influence to make the scion bigger, like even if you use CAS or GEN. I was looking at one question saying, what is a good rootstock using GEN? And some of you answered that DUSA on GEN, it doesn't do good because DUSA is too vigorous and it's too big. So this is the kind of information that we need to look. I can tell you that these 5 rootstocks, they are similar size to CAS, or in the case of PP35, in some cases, in some conditions that we don't understand because research needs to be done, these 3 are smaller. Like for example, in Agos, you can see this is one tree that is from another accession. And this is PP35. So PP35 in some places tends to be a very vigorous tree, but a small tree. But again, it's not dwarf, it's just conditioned by the environment. And this is DUSA and PP45. But in most of our cases, our trees are not in different size as DUSA. So they are similar size to DUSA, so there are no, and PP35 is one that in some conditions grows smaller. This is PP42 with DUSA in Santa Paula. And I put here the conditions under what those 3 are rating. Under Phytophthora, high pH, high alkalinity conditions in this plot in Santa Paula. This is PP80, which we know is resistant to Phytophthora. It has tolerance to salinity and maybe heat tolerance. That's what it does well on Southern California. And then this plot, it has also high salinity, high pH, and high salinity, and you can see here a comparison between a DUSA tree and a PP83. So you will have access to this information through my report that I sent to CAC, and he will make, team probably will make it available with all this detailed information. And also, recently, since 2019, since we are envisioning we're going to release this 5 rootstock, we have very fortunately that lots of you wants to invest on this new rootstock. So we are doing these semi-commercial trials with you guys. So we have so far 2 large commercial trials, where we call them semi-commercial, with Leo and John. The goal is plan 100 trees for each rootstock. All of this one will be CAS, but next year, hopefully we can do, if you are willing to do this with us, we can do it with REIT or with GEM. So we are putting 5 trials this year, having 35, 40, 45, 42, 80, and DUSA, of course, as a control. And these are the conditions that so far we are testing. So we always have PRR, Phytophthora, and high chloride, high salinity, high pH. But we're going to put some plot this year with Pete Miller, and he has amazingly a soil, like high incidence of Phytophthora, and also he has a very heavy soil. He has like a clay soil, so we haven't tested these rootstocks in these conditions yet, so it will be a perfect plot to see how these ones will do in terms of yield when you grow like 100 trees of rootstocks with CAS. And we're going to have a new plot in San Luis Obispo, because I don't think we don't have, at least under my directorship, a rootstock trials in San Luis Obispo, so this will be the first time we're going to put one. And also in Ventura with Rick and CJ, we look at the plots in there, and it's highly infected with Phytophthora. So this will be the perfect time to check our rootstock for replanting, because that is the major case. You know, you will have a lot of problems with replanting if you have a higher amount of Phytophthora in your plot. So I just want to mention that, like Marilu said, we are going to take our 5 rootstocks worldwide with the new funding with the Rosemillas. So we will be able to not test these 5 rootstocks in California, but also we will be testing in other countries. And you can go to the recent news. I put the link in here so you can go and then check it out, the news and what this about. Now, many of you guys are asking, okay, I think I'm running out of time, but I think this is important. So I think many of you have been asking about rootstock and scion combinations. And the best answer to that Marilu and I can tell you, and then Marilu can get her opinion, is that we don't really know which is your best scion and rootstock combination, because we haven't done the research, because the only research that is available is the one that Marilu has done and have started in 2012, when she put this planting that fortunately she include 35 and 40 in his scion and rootstock combination trial. Now I'm just putting one slide from that she gave me. She shared with me her data when she tried this CAS, Carmen, Gem, Land, and Reed scions with these combinations of rootstocks, Stenmeyer, Stedon, Juicy with release, and the 35, 40, and 45 which are going to be released. Now, this plot is in Satikoi, Marilu can tell later. But basically the take-home message that she told me today is that in her statistical analysis, there is no a variety rootstock interaction, at least for 3 sites currently. So all of them will give the 3 sites. Now, I need to know, maybe she will tell me about, so she can tell us more about her plot, but what I wanted to put here is the yield of this plot for over the years until 2019 by rootstocks. Okay, so if you look at PP35, if you look DUSA, there is no a significant difference. Same letter means no different. So if you compare DUSA with PP35, for example, there is no difference independent of what scion did you use. Now, Marilu can make maybe a slide that she can share with you guys, and we can put it in my presentation about actually individual rootstocks for her varieties, because that's information that some of you want to know. But in general, this information tells us that at least between PP35 and DUSA, there is no difference if you use any of the 5 rootstocks on terms of yield. Okay, then what about PP45, PP45, and if you compare DUSA and PP45, there is a difference. So PP45 has more yield independent of what your rootstock what scion you will use. If you use CAS, Carmen, or any of these scion, PP45 will in general have more yield than DUSA, but similar yield of PP35. Okay, so this graph is telling us that PP35 and PP40 might be a good rootstock that you can try with other scions. Okay, so and then I'm going to this point. Okay, why you guys need to think about being more flexible. As a plant pathologist, I'm not a grower, and to be honest, I only have been working with avocado for 5 years. But I'm a plant pathologist, and a plant pathologist, I can tell you, we don't want us to happen what it happened with citrus and HLB. So we need to be prepared. Laura wheel, everybody knows, is a threat. It's a little threat for avocados worldwide. Once we get avocado, Laura wheel here, and if we are not prepared or we don't have some knowledge, then our industry will be wiped out. Laura wheel is very invasive. You can see, you can have the trees dead in like a weeks. And then this is a slide that was shared for my colleague from Florida. And it can be for group grafted. So if you're planning to do a high density, only with a HAS, who I will show you the data, and then you get Laura wheel, you can lose your orchard. So it is the time that we all have to start thinking broadly and trying to test more combinations and find those rootstock scion combinations that can be resistant or tolerant to Laura wheel. Okay, so this is, I wanted to show this a couple of data for some of you who were to the World Avocado Conference. This is a data shared with my collaborator, Bruce Schaffer, which University of Florida has been doing an amazing job and helping other states and countries to prepare until the obvious coming of Laura-Will. So you can see my take-home message, as you can see here in this plot, you have CAS and 3 different rootstocks. This is a preliminary data, but his preliminary data indicate that CAS is susceptible to Laura-Will. So if you have only CAS, then if Laura-Will can heal, your orchard will be doomed. And then, but you can see here that if you combine rootstocks, if you see, this is CAS with Duke, which is a Mexican. This is CAS with Toro Canyon, and this is CAS with Dusa. So there are rootstock sign combinations that make your disease progression shorter or slow. So we don't have resistance to this pathogen. There is no resistance available, but you can manage by having the best rootstock sign combinations to plant. Now, I wanted to share this slide to you because you can see that there is a different effect when you have a scion than when you evaluate only the rootstocks. You have here the 3 rootstocks, Dusa, Duke, and Toro Canyon. There is no big difference on progression. But if you grafted to different roots, the same Duke 7, which seems to be the best in here, the Duke 7 seems to be the best for slowing down the Laura-Will progression. And you grafted with 3 different scions, like Walden, which is a West Indian. You grafted with Duke, which is not scion, but it's a Mexican combination, and Reed, which is Guatemalan. You can see that your Duke Mexican-Guatemalan combination actually does pretty well comparing with Walden, which is the Florida industry West Indian rootstock. So this is a take-home message that we need to find these rootstock scion combinations and be prepared. And I'm glad to see that you guys are planning in GrowGen and hopefully planning on plant Reed. And like I say, if you are interested on testing our rootstock with other varieties, CAS as a control and with like Jen and Reed, please shoot me an email and we can work it out. Or send an email to Marilu. So another thing about, just to finalize, okay, it's dangerous to have CAS. It's dangerous to only rely on Dusa because there is a disease that we don't have that problem right now in here, but it's becoming a problem in several countries like Europe, like Spain, South Africa, it's a problem in Mexico, which is white root rot that is caused by Rosellinia necatrix. And Dusa is it's highly susceptible to this disease. So this kind of fungi it can get in here from Mexico, and we need to prepare. So if you have Dusa and CAS, and we come out with white root rot, and Laura-Will gets here, we finally don't have industry anymore. So my take-home message is we need more varieties, we need more rootstock, and we need to find scion rootstock combination. But we cannot do it alone because we can test it in our South Coast stations or Lincoln UC stations, but we need to do the test in the growers' orchard. So, and thank you that you all guys are very nice to collaborate with Marilu and I. Thank you for sending zillions of letters when I request for asking for federal grants. And with that, I wanted to acknowledge all the people who has been and is been working in my lab, the avocado breeding and genomics team, the sources that we have for funding, UCR, California Avocado Commission, which has been historically and continuous like funding, Eurosemilla, which just joined our partnership, and other federal grants that we are getting to continue the work. So with that, I'm done. Sorry, I think I get over time.
Wow. So do you have a series of poll questions you wanted to ask, Patty?
Oh, yeah. Can you?
Peter, oh, there you go.
So send on Marilu. I think we both need you guys to help us to see how we can better serve you. Because at the end, you are our customer. So we can do whatever we want, but I mean, trade, we can pursue whatever trade we decided to do, but it is better that we are meeting your needs. So please answer the questions like if you use a clonal rootstock, do you know the rootstock properties without before you take it from the nursery? And let us to guide which you think are the best, the more urgent traits that we need to address. And also I think I put a question about how often did you test your orchard for Phytophthora, and what kind of methods do you use for controlling the disease? Okay, so yeah, so as we know, most of you use clonal rootstock because I know like US, California, and countries like South Africa are probably the ones using heavily clonal rootstock. Most of the other people use seedling, and that's something that we need also to address for those people who use seedling rootstock. So you know the property. I'm glad to see that 61% know the property, because if you get informed decision for what to plant, what to apply, the most informed decisions that you do, you can manage better your orchards, and then you can contact us, and hopefully we can work out and make a manual or something where we can put all the properties management, at least that we know. So I say 72% Phytophthora root rot, 63 salinity, 50% drought. So I think we are, and 48, so drought and heat seems to hit closely. So I think we're doing good with that in the program. Density planting 35. But I mean, I'm glad that the 2018 needs didn't change that much with the 2020. So we are working on it, don't worry. We have Phytophthora, we have salinity. Hopefully we can continue now with this new funding with like Peggy on rootstocks and science. We have in the pipeline with drought. We just need to find money to do it. And heat, okay. Glad to see. Yeah, like in the last 24 months, how often did you test your orchard for Phytophthora root rot? And just please select one. Okay, wow, 71 you don't test it. And don't worry, we will address, and I understand that you don't test it because we don't have an easy tool available for you to test. So we are going to work on that. So we hope we can bring you some of these really cheap, easy tests, because I can understand it takes a lot of time for you and money to collect seeds and send it to labs like Fruit Grower Lab, who it will cost you $40 to do the test for sampling. So I could understand you guys don't test because you don't have the tools that they can be economically sustainable for you to do your testing, because it involves for you to collect and send it. So we hope can fix that one too with my research group and my collaborators. So for those who manage Phytophthora root rot, I would like you to select the ones that apply to you. Like, what do you use? Did you use a tolerant rootstock? Did you use phosphonate products like potassium phosphate? Or did you use mefenoxam, which is Ridomil? Or you just use cultural practices? Okay, but I mean, 20% of you use phosphonate, which is potassium phosphate. 50%, so similar a number of growers you use tolerant rootstock, which is good. Cultural practice 23. So that's good, because that's what you need to be doing. You need to do IPM, which is integrated pest manager. As I showed with my previous slide, you need to use a tolerant rootstock. You need to apply cultural practice. Don't overwater. Don't overwater and underwater. Just proper irrigation. You can use mulching. I know there are, I'm pretty sure Ben knows way more than me about cultural practices, but just use all that you can to manage your orchard for disease, for salinity.
Okay, so people got to go, but let me just finish up here, and then we can continue asking questions as long as people hang around. So this is part of a series that Peter Casina's put together called What Are the UC Ag Experts Talking About? And this is available online, and you can see there are a variety of different topics that people can view. And these are the topics that have been displayed. These are 1-hour presentations that had continuing education units. And so there's topics on avocado and citrus and other crops. So with that, we're going to hang around and ask some questions if people want to continue. Thank you very much.